We're used to everything moving forward in time. Glide over a fan and you are propelled upwards. Walk over an unstable bridge and it crumbles. But what if objects could be inverted in time so that while you move forward, they move backward? That's the question the movie Tenet tries to answer, and it's also something I want to explore in my game Eyewinder. In previous devlogs, I've already added time rewind, acceleration, and cloning mechanics. Now it's time to introduce the final time mechanic, inversion. Some inverted objects behave straightforwardly. Fans push the player away, but when inverted they pull the player towards them. Some behaviors are surprising. Take this bridge, for example. Normally it crumbles when the player steps on it, but if it is inverted it can be walked on without crumbling because from the bridge's perspective, every step the player takes on it is the first. Each second into the player's future is the second into the bridge's past. So if you rewind time while standing on it, the bridge starts to crumble because rewinding time from the player's perspective makes time move forward from the bridge's perspective. Once you stop rewinding time, the bridge resumes its backwards journey through time and rebuilds itself. Let's take it a step further. What if the player could invert themselves? That's where this inverter monolith comes in. When the player interacts with it, their time flow reverses, and they start moving backwards through time. This allows you to witness your past actions replaying in reverse order. It also flips your interaction with other puzzle elements. Fans that normally pull you towards them now push you away, bridges that normally crumble now stay intact when you cross them, and so on. By having both forward and backwards inverters, the player can freely switch between the two, creating an endless stream of clones. This opens up numerous puzzle possibilities. Here's a puzzle that utilizes the backwards cloning effect when you invert. The objective is to reach the highest island. You can activate a moving platform across the first couple islands by placing a crystal on a pedestal. On the second island, there's another pedestal that needs to be activated but no crystal. If you remove the crystal from the first pedestal, the platform stops moving. How can this be solved? The solution is as follows. First, place the crystal on the pedestal and wait for a moment. Then remove the crystal from the pedestal and invert yourself while holding the crystal. Your past self will then place their crystal on the pedestal, allowing you to cross the gap and place your crystal on the second pedestal. Puzzles can get even more fun by introducing a new special type of time flow called timeless. Timeless objects are indicated by a green glow and always have a time scale of 1. This means that trying to rewind a timeless object will have no effect. For example, a timeless crumbling bridge can only be used once. Even if the player rewinds back, the bridge will not be restored. This enables puzzles such as this one, which features a mix of normal and timeless moving platforms. The objective is to transport the crystal across the platforms, but the player cannot jump while holding it, so they must walk instead. By rewinding time, they can alter the positions of the timeless platforms in relation to the regular platforms, creating a clear path forward. Another important property of timeless objects is that they behave the same regardless of whether you are inverted or not. Whether you are moving forwards or backwards in time, a timeless fan will always push you away. This opens up a bunch of new puzzles. For instance, I had an idea for a puzzle involving crossing crumbling bridges while carrying crystals to their pedestals. Initially, the puzzle was relatively simple with 2 inverted bridges and 2 regular bridges. There are a number of different ways this puzzle can be solved. But by replacing one of the inverted bridges with a timeless bridge, I introduced a new element that requires the player to carefully consider when to cross it because it can only be crossed once. After successfully solving a puzzle, you will receive a dragon egg as a reward. To understand the purpose of this egg, I need to explain the rough and very subject to change story of the game. At the beginning, Bob resides peacefully on his own floating island, accompanied by his dragon friends. But one day, the Eye Nation and kidnapped all the dragon friends. Using their time powers, the Eyes de-aged the dragons, turning them back into eggs, and they hid those eggs in rifts scattered throughout the islands. But for, reasons, one eye stayed behind and fused with Bob. This fusion grants him the ability to control time and embark on his quest to reunite with his dragons. At the beginning of the game, you start on your own floating island near the top of the map, while the final boss awaits at the bottom. As you descend to lower islands, you'll encounter tougher enemies and puzzles that prepare you for the final showdown. During exploration, your main objective is to find rifts that transport you to the puzzle's rewarding dragon eggs. You can then hatch these eggs back at your base, which will hatch a dragon that will offer some kind of special bonus. I'm also thinking a Sonic Adventure 2 Chow Garden style minigame where you can breed dragons for better bonuses and different looks would be fun. As you take care of them, the dragons will progress from being babies to adults to Lord of Desolation. Okay, maybe not that last one. Unless... So the core game loop involves exploring, finding intriguing puzzles, enemies, and quests, and then returning home to strengthen your dragons and repeat the process. When it comes to puzzle rifts, there are a few restrictions in place to ensure smooth gameplay. Firstly, Your time manipulation abilities and rifts won't consume mana, eliminating the concern of not being able to complete a puzzle due to insufficient mana capacity. This is crucial since the game is open world, allowing players to visit rifts in almost any order. While inside rifts, the player won't be able to use the clone ability. This limitation is in place because the clone ability doesn't introduce any new puzzles that Inversion doesn't already cover, and can potentially break existing puzzles. The grappling hook won't be present in puzzle rifts for similar reasons. Allowing the grappling hook would make it effortless to bypass many of the fan puzzles. If you've watched the last devlog, you might be wondering what happened to the gear I lost so much of my sanity to. Once I integrated the gear with the door, I began constructing the puzzle levels and realized that the monotonous gray dungeon aesthetic quickly becomes dull. In games like Breath of the Wild, even with fantastic shrine designs, the uniformity of the shrines make them feel repetitive. So there was no way the gray environment in my game would stay fresh across the 60 or so planned puzzles, even if I varied the color. This led me to decide that all the puzzles should take place on floating islands, which aligns better with the game's context and allows for unique decoration based on different biomes. As part of this process, I had to redesign my existing puzzle elements to better suit a floating island setting. Gear was replaced with a crystal that can be placed on a pedestal to activate it. Unfortunately, before I made this decision, I had already designed a number of puzzles in Figma assuming that everything was happening in a dungeon environment composed of square tiles. So it took a little more work to translate a design like this into a puzzle on floating islands like this. I'm much happier with the end result though. You might be wondering how these puzzles will work in multiplayer. The answer is simple. They don't. Initially, I had planned for each player to have their own instance of a puzzle and compete to finish it first. However, over the past few months, I've encountered numerous conflicts between the time system and the multiplayer framework I'm using. Even though the last few months I've only been testing it in single player mode, the multiplayer framework introduces delays to certain actions, and even a slight difference of one frame can break the time system. Despite my initial hope of avoiding most multiplayer complications by making things client authoritative, it looks like making the game have online multiplayer is more trouble than it's worth. As a result, I've made the decision to drop the online multiplayer feature. Despite what I said in the first devlog, reasonable scope is for fools who only care about things like shipping a game or preserving their sanity. I do value my sanity to some extent. I still have an interest in implementing local multiplayer in some form, as long as it doesn't pose significant challenges. This is something I can focus on later in development if I have enough time. That leaves me with more time for solving other difficult problems. Like after making the fans, I noticed there were some significant drops in frame rate when rewinding time. By opening up the profiler, I discovered this was because of the particle system simulation taking an excessive amount of time. This is a direct consequence of the way I'm rewinding particle systems. In the Unity editor, I'm getting around 200 FPS when nothing is happening. If I start running a single particle simulation, the frame rate is about the same. Particle systems are designed to play forward, so if I play the system for a second and then stop it, it only needs to simulate the particles for that 1 second. But when I rewind the particles, I have to set them to an earlier time. So instead of simulating for only 1 second, the particles have to simulate whatever amount of time they were set to. So if the particles have only been playing for a few seconds, rewinding one particle effect is about 100 times slower than playing one particle normally. But it gets really bad when the particle has been running for a longer duration. Just rewinding one wind effect after roughly 13 minutes of simulation in the editor drops my frame rate from 200 to 15 FPS. In-game, the simulation cost of rewinding this one particle effect after 13 minutes is roughly 40,000 more times expensive than the normal effect. I can mitigate this somewhat by doing things like not running the rewind 50 times a second for particles, or by resetting the simulation when the player isn't looking so it never reaches the longer lengths of time. But it's still really expensive, which means I either have to not rewind long-running particle effects, or come up with some fancy shaders to replace them that don't rely on simulating particles. Another performance issue I ran into was rendering the grass. Even the simple puzzle scene with around 7,000 grass instances has noticeably worse performance. Luckily, there's a great pack on the asset store called GPU Instancer that offloads a lot of the grass rendering work onto the GPU where it belongs. It also does things like occlusion and frustum calling, so only grass that the player can see is rendered. To stress test it, I made the scene with over 200,000 grass instances. With GPU Instancer on, I'm getting around 30 FPS, but when I turn it off, it jumps down to around 15. Now that the base for the majority of gameplay mechanics is done, the next 1 or 2 devlogs will be focused on getting the game into a state where it can be built into a demo for all of you to play, so I can get feedback on what works and what doesn't. Subscribe or join the Discord to make sure you don't miss it.
Bob doth possess a power hushed and unknown. A flame doth reside in his nether regions, that doth set him flown. His dragon friends, trapped in a fate most dire, Bob doth have a plan, and the power to set them free from mire.